In this video I'll be painting one of the figures from our new Winter Finnish range. I'll talk about painting white over a black undercoat, and I'll go over how I do winter basing. To start with, the figure is undercoated with black. I've given him a slight dry brush of pale grey to make the details show up on camera. You don't need to do that. A lot of people find painting white difficult and slow, but it doesn't have to be. I'm going to be using a 4-step process. Now, 4 steps might sound like a lot, especially for 15mm, but it actually doesn't take as long as you might think, and the results are worth it. There are two main issues with painting white. The first is opacity. Trying to get a solid coverage without leaving visible brushstrokes can be quite tricky. Working up to white through a series of light greys will help with that. The second issue is more subtle, and it has to do with blending. Now, light-coloured acrylic paints darken noticeably and become less intense as they dry. That means you can't trust your eyes to tell you whether your highlighting is bright enough, or to stop you from going overboard and making it too bright. Mixing the paint for all of your stages carefully at the start lets you disregard how the brush strokes look as they're going on and just trust your paints, as long as you can remember which one's which. First up, medium sea grey. It's actually a pretty light grey, but it's going to look really dark in comparison to white, so we're going to end up covering up almost all of it. But it's important because white objects are defined by their shadows. You can't highlight white because paint doesn't go any lighter. Next, sky grey, and we're going to be covering most of the uniform. That's pretty bright. If you stopped there, it actually wouldn't look too bad on the table, but we want a bit more definition. Next, a 50-50 mix of sky grey and white. I like this mix, but there are a lot of very pale grey paints available, so if you're going to be painting a lot of white and you don't feel like mixing, feel free to experiment. Finally, I'll carefully do a few selective highlights with pure white. There you go, a white uniform, and it actually didn't take too long. I'll also paint the metal base medium sea grey to make basing easier later on. For the face, I'll start with beige brown, then cover most of the features with a mix of flat flesh and beige brown, and finally add highlights of pure flat flesh. The field cap will be grey-green. That's the basic uniform colour underneath the winter camouflage suits. If you want some variation, you could paint some of the trousers grey-green too. Most of the fur caps were grey as well, and the woolen gloves. I'll lighten the green-grey with a bit of medium sea grey to add highlights. I'll use chocolate brown to paint the rifle stock, the water bottle, and any leather items, including belts and ammo pouches. The boots were black leather, except the Lapland boots. Those are the ones with the distinctive curled up toe, and those could be various shades of light brown. Green brown is good for those. I'll highlight the water bottle with US Field Drab. Now, the upper parts of some kinds of Lapland boots was made from woolen felt, and you can paint those US Field Drab too. The rifle stock and the brown leather items I'll highlight with flat earth. Base coat the bread bag brown violet, then paint it khaki, and finally highlight it by adding some stone grey. Brown violet is also the helmet colour. I'll paint the metal parts of the rifle gunmetal grey. Just a tip, it's a good idea to change your painting water after using metallic colours, otherwise sometimes flecks of the metallic stuff float in the water and then they can show up in your non-metallic colours. If you need to, use black to tidy up the boots. The cap badge is actually white and blue concentric circles, but I don't fancy trying to paint it so small, so I'm just going to do a single dot of sky blue, or red for officers. And that's it, he's ready to be glued to a base with his friends. The bases with holes make this bit somewhat optional, but if you want an even, realistic texture on your base, you may want to cover it with spackle, pumice gel, or whatever you usually use. I'm using pre-mixed plaster filler. When it's dry, I scrape it back carefully to tidy up any messy bits. For the base covering, I'm going to be applying Gale Force 9 Snow. It looks really bright white in the tub, but it's actually quite transparent. Now this means if you just put on one layer on a normally painted base, it's going to end up looking quite dirty and sort of melted, sort of more like slush than snow. So I'm going to paint the base before putting on my snow. First with medium sea grey, then a very heavy dry brush of sky grey, and then a lighter dry brush with white. And the last thing before applying the snow, I'll paint the base edge in a contrasting colour. It's up to you whether you like the look of this. Some people like the base edge to blend in with the rest of the base. I'm using German Camo medium brown. Then paint the whole base with watered down PVA white glue. And sprinkle on plenty of snow. You can just kind of tap off the excess. You'll want to blow or brush off the loose snow once the glue is dry. And there you go, all finished. Happy painting and thanks for watching. Hyvä Suomi!